Welcome to the Average Joe Jiu-Jitsu Podcast. This is episode 13, Thomas Rozdzynski. Thomas Rozdzynski is a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and also a black belt in Judo. Thomas is one of the head instructors at ROL Academy, located at Orland Park, Illinois, specifically at 15629 South 71st Street Court, or in Orland Park, Illinois. And is also the host of ROL Radio Podcast. Thomas, thanks for coming on today and talking to me. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good, except for my little whatever's going on in my nose. So anybody who's listening, I apologize if I clear my throat or whatever. I've got some kind of like allergy thing going on or a head cold. Thomas, how old are you? And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm 42. I don't know, is this considered a middle age already or not?
Yeah. I wish I was 42 though.
I don't know exactly how this falls into the categories and all the other stuff, but yeah, I'm 42. You nailed it right in the beginning. It's I have the privilege of sharing jiu-jitsu, my experience, my life with students on the mat and remotely these days. Obviously that's fully available. And then recently, last year and a half, we have launched the ROL Radio Podcast, which it created a very interesting dynamic of conversation and points of stimulation for the students and people out there. I shouldn't say students, but people out there who really kind of want to engage with within martial arts, not only jiu-jitsu, but just martial arts in general. So it's been great journey so far.
Awesome. Yeah. I think you're doing a really great job, and it's an honor for me to have you on the show today. One thing that when I was looking at your background that I was like, oh, that's cool, is that you have a black belt in both jiu-jitsu and judo. And, anybody who's done a little bit of history or study of where Brazilian jiu-jitsu came from knows that it came from judo, right? Did you start training judo first or jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu was my first passion. Started around year 2000. Judo, as judo has a big component in jiu-jitsu, not only historically, but simply because most of the engagements start on our feet. So there is a component of judo. But more formally, just a few years back, probably about 4 or 5 years back, I engaged more formally into judo, and I had the privilege of training and learning more of the have a deeper understanding. Let's put it that way. Have a deeper understanding of judo and throws and how the mechanics work from our feet to the ground. So
nice. Yeah. And what was your impression of the Nawas? I mean, the Nawas in judo, like as it stands today, as a comparison to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? What was your opinion?
I look at them as two very different activities. Okay. Sports, even though one originated from the other, it all boils down to the fact that I think the goal is very different in each, right? So if you do jiu-jitsu, even though we start on our feet and things go to the ground, most of the time we continue on the ground. So the emphasis is, the goal and emphasis is really different, right? In judo, moment your shoulders touch the ground, it's over. Go get your water bottle, hot dog, keys, and you can go home. I mean, that's essentially it, right? So it's a very different goal behind the activity itself, right? So in judo, we have to be very aware what is happening on our feet. In jiu-jitsu, I think the approach is a little bit, there's some leniency, if you will, right? So if you are going to get taken down, or if you sit down, go to the ground, the consequence could be, in the tournament scenario, there could be points, but it's not end of the world. We can continue to recover from that. So I look at them as two very different activities with a different purpose. Now they complement each other quite greatly. Judo to jiu-jitsu and jiu-jitsu to judo. So I think for those who are engaging in jiu-jitsu as a practitioner, I think jiu-jitsu plays a fundamental role, not only from a skill set perspective, but really to understand how balance works, how what opportunities we have standing up, right? And especially those who do compete, I think that is one of the big components that often is missed by practitioners and students.
Oh, I agree. I think that, the standing game, I know in my experience, the standing game wasn't really emphasized. We trained it, but it wasn't really emphasized. And so it just wasn't a strong skill. And I found like in myself, when I competed a lot of times, I would pull guard. I wouldn't try to do takedowns because I was like, there's no way wasn't proficient enough with them to want to try them in a tournament. So I see that. So in with throws, like the other martial arts I did in the past, I did learn probably 4 or 5 basic judo throws, and we trained them, in a controlled environment. But again, it never really was a live situation, so I never had the confidence. I still don't have the confidence that I really pull it off in real life right now. But I would assume, since you're obviously a black belt in judo, that your stand-up game is more judo based as opposed to wrestling based for competition.
Yeah, I mean, I have. I don't have much of a wrestling background. Well, let's make it clear, I don't have any wrestling background, period. I mean, whatever my wrestling comes from is from studying wrestling styles, really, to improve my jiu-jitsu and improve my my stand-up. So yeah, you would be correct on that. A lot of my approach on the feet will be very judo based, very throw based, to gain that control on the ground.
Yeah. I actually have lately. I've been playing with, because I don't have access to judo or nor the time or the funding behind me to actually put time into doing that. So I just concentrate on BJJ. But I like Bernardo Fiera's way of doing it, where he will pull guard, like the half guard, and then he'll wrestle from there. Like then he takes a take, he gets a single leg, whatever to take down, got some top pass, etc. I do like that idea too. So I guess that's another way of implementing wrestling or takedowns or pulling guard in a different way, with a different mindset.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty behind jiu-jitsu is that it is so rich in what we can implement and what we can do, that gives practitioners a lot of flexibility, if you will. I mean, you have plenty of jiu-jitsu practitioners on a very high level, and their judo is phenomenal, and you have others who their wrestling is phenomenal.
Right.
And let's be honest, there are some who completely suck on their feet, and they are, I mean, world class on the ground. So there is a lot of room, I think, to maneuver within these dynamics, as long as you know what the goals are, and as long as you know what the rules of engagement are. Really, that's the key.
Yeah, and I think what your game is. I mean, like if you look at like Gordon Ryan, when he was first coming on the scene and making a name for himself, his whole thing was ashigarami, his legs, and so he would pull. There was no takedowns or anything. Yeah. So when did you start? Or when did you open ROL Academy? When did that happen?
We opened roughly 6 years ago. So the academy is freshly new. My life journey took me in the various different directions, and then about 7 years ago, actually, we started the idea of opening an academy, and we went through various of preparations and plans and things of that nature, including looking for location and all the other stuff. And it took us probably about a year to really open the doors.
Right.
But once we did, it's been quite a journey. Let's just put it that way. A lot of errors, a lot of obstacles, a lot of grind. It is what it is, but I would not go back. I would not change it for anything. So I love it.
Yeah, I envy you. I mean, I started jiu-jitsu at 41. I'm 50 now. And so obviously I'm not going to, my ambitions are not for like high level competition title or something like that, or being a world champion, but I really want to be a coach. That's my thing. So I really would like to one day have my own academy, or at least work in an academy for a good majority of my time, and coach others. What has been the biggest challenge you've faced as an academy owner and a coach?
There's been many. I mean, it's really the bottom line. But I think the biggest thing that struck me, that hit me, is that teaching jiu-jitsu. Well, first, let's just take it back. I think owning a business, which is a jiu-jitsu academy, that's one thing. Teaching jiu-jitsu, that's another thing. And then learning jiu-jitsu, that's completely separate. And that was very eye-opening for me. And I think that's often a miss. Those three are often mixed and missed factors when it comes to being an instructor, being a leader, being a business owner. And even though I think they fall into the same bucket, same category, often they really don't have much to do with each other, right? And what I mean by this is, obviously, in order for you to teach jiu-jitsu, you need to know jiu-jitsu, but there's plenty of examples of individuals who are world-class, top-level competitors and jiu-jitsu phenomenal practitioners, and their teachings, their teaching skills are just not there, or there's room to improve, and that results in very unique experience where we're not going to judge anybody or get into that, but there's plenty of examples of just average Joe Schmo who does achieve the level of black belt, and then they become an instructor, and because of the effort they put into learning how to teach, their instruction is really, really phenomenal. And there are plenty examples of that. You have guys who haven't accomplished a lot on the competition stage, and maybe they have not been known to that level, but their teachings are just phenomenal. Phenomenal. So that was a really eye-opening for me. And then obviously there's the business aspect of all of this, right? Just because jiu-jitsu does not know that doesn't mean that you know how to run business. And often I think academies are being viewed as clubs, if you will. We hang out, there's friendships and relationships established, and sometimes those conflict with how business should be run. And and obviously it's a very delicate area where we have to navigate between relationships and all that, but if you want to run a successful business, you got to run the business, right? If it is what it is.
Yeah, and I think that goes both ways. I think also with the students, they have to understand that too. They have to respect the fact that you're running a business and that you have bills to pay and overhead and et cetera, and not to take advantage of the situation. How many hours a week do you teach personally plus run the business?
Yeah, that's always an interesting topic. I actually had a conversation with one of my students, and I think my ratio between teaching and then business operation is 40 to 60, meaning 40% is teaching and 60% is actually operational business. Which I know it might be surprising. I think there's this misconception, I think, in just in general, that instructors just come in, chill, they'll come in, they'll teach a class or two, maybe a private or two, and they go home and they do nothing. They video games. Maybe that's the case for some of them. It's not for me. There's a lot of grind that goes into it. We put a lot of effort here with staff and everybody who's involved in instructors to make sure that Academy runs efficiently, when we create an environment where students can really benefit, and there's a value behind the time. And listen, there's a monetary investment in all of this. Like we can't hide that part. People pay to get service, and delivering the service at the highest level, or what the expectations are, at least it's critical. I think it's critical for them to succeed, and it's critical for us as business owners, academy owners, to really succeed. So
that's that part is always like one of those, the thing about them pay, about how the students pay and what they expect to get back, and I've heard various instructors have various opinions on that. Some from the range of, oh yeah, I'm here to provide you the best service I can and give you everything you need to. Well, you're just paying to be a member of my club, and and this is how we do things, and you just go along for the ride. Have you experienced those type of personalities before?
I mean, listen, everybody's going to do business their own way, right? And I don't think there should be necessarily judgment passed on this guy runs his academy that way and the other one runs it this way. It's it's their academy, they can do whatever they want, right? But I think from a student or client perspective, I would really try to understand what are the expectations and what is being delivered. So can I train any day? Can I train once a week? Are you going to be teaching a class, or somebody else is teaching a class? What's included in all of this? Like, are there specific rules? Are there specific guidelines? Are there specific things that have to happen? Like I think all of that sets the client for success. And ultimately, if the client is happy and successful, the owner will be happy and successful. That's how I view it. I think a lot of these misunderstandings come into play where there's blurry lines, when there's gray area, things change unexpectedly with minimal communication.
Right.
And I think that's where higher or different expectations are being created. And I think that's a recipe, for disaster.
No, I agree. Those are all good points. I think those are good points for people to think about when they're looking for an academy too. If they're just new to jiu-jitsu and they're not really sure where to train, those are all great questions.
And I think what's important really to keep in mind is that even though jiu-jitsu might be for a lot of people, not every academy is going to be for everybody.
Exactly.
I think that's really, really important to think about. If one is looking to start jiu-jitsu, I would really think about things like, what are the goals for the individual? How old are they? What environment they are walking into, right? So like we'll take two extremes and we have a heavy competition oriented academy, and then we have another academy who is maybe very self-defense driven, over maybe the demographics are, for middle-aged guys, 35 up, the chemistry and the deliverables within those environments will be very, very different. So you really have to ask yourself, what do I want out of this? And then I can start finding a place that's going to suit me the best, from chemistry, culture, instruction, expectations, and then pricing. I mean, that's big factor behind it too. There are academies who will charge, $400 a month, and there are academies who will charge $40 a month. And not that one is wrong than the other. It's just understand what you're getting for the price you're getting. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, those are all, again, very good points. Yeah. And like even academies that require you to have their Ghees, their equipment, buy their stuff, all those things are all important to consider. Like, do you want to compete? Do you not want to compete? Is the academy more competitive, competition driven or just training driven? Are you looking for self-defense? If you're not, and on that self-defense, what's your take on self-defense in BJJ? What's your opinion of that?
Well, I think it's, whether you're in sport or not, whether you're competition or not, you're still defending yourself. That's how I look at it. Right. And historically, I think jiu-jitsu was sourced from self-defense and protecting yourself. Right. Now, obviously, we're not going to be teaching knife tactics and defending with some of these street-like situations when you have a competition-oriented academy, right? And the same thing, vice versa. You're not going to be doing berimbolo when somebody jumps you in the alley, right? So and again, this boils down to really what your goal is, what you're trying to achieve. My personal view is you really got to look at it, what you want. If you want to know how to protect yourself, well, then you got to invest into protecting yourself. You need to understand how you will react until those unusual and high stress situations, and how will you protect yourself, but if you want to compete, then this might not be the place for you. Like you got to put these concepts of, attack and street-like situations aside, and you really got to focus on points, strategy, tactics, and what do you do in the scenarios of 5 or 7 minute match, and how you strategically move on from one point to another to achieve that goal, which would be the first place. Right.
Do you feel like there's also maybe a middle ground between those two?
I think so too. I think so too. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think there's going through these, I think that what's beautiful, let me spin it this way. I think what's beautiful that there are academies that will provide the middle ground, meaning they have a program which is focused on self-defense. They have a program which is a little bit more sport-like driven. They will cater towards maybe the 45 or 50-year-old guys in a safe environment, but at the same time, they will stimulate the 25-year-old who has by far more energy and he's a little bit more agile, and it just requires a little bit different stimulation. I think that's really what one needs to understand, where they are walking into and what they are getting in return.
Right. Those are great points. So when did you start the ROL Radio Podcast?
We started during COVID. I'm laughing. Yeah. I'm laughing because, you know, it was purely out of being bored. It was purely because we wanted to stay busy, right? So there were those, you know, 3 months, I think, when the academy was completely closed here in Illinois, and we were, you know, locked down and everything. And even though we were doing online classes and some of that, we were stimulating our students remotely, you know, me and my guys, we were bored out of our minds. Like what are we going to do? We went from literally 8-10 hour days to 1 hour day. Like you're bored out of your mind. And obviously we want to keep them busy from a compensation perspective and keep everybody employed. That was really important to me. So I went to one of my guys and I say, hey, listen, we're going to start a podcast. And he laughed at me. He was like, good luck. And I was like, no, we really are. And he's like, we don't know anything about podcasts. I was like, I know, but we're going to do one. So we got the equipment and, you know, we, and we started it and it, you know, we kind of learned as we went and that few months gave us, you know, ability to do some research and start some really interesting conversations, you know, and by now, you know, we've been at it for little over a year, and we've created some great relationships, you know, great friendships. And I think we could just simply creating an exposure to what jiu-jitsu is and some of the historical facts of, you know, where people came from, how they got to jiu-jitsu. And ultimately, you know, we share lessons. And I think that's what's important. It gives a little bit more exposure to somebody who maybe doesn't have the ability to meet guys like Rorion Gracie or Roy Dean or Elon Knight or, you know, Robert Drysdale. Like it's just, it is what it is. You know, some of these guys are not accessible because they are busy, and there's a platform where they can really dip into it and they can listen to some of these very casual conversations and, you know, see that these guys are human just like us, and, you know, they just love jiu-jitsu. Yeah,
I actually I got the idea for mine during the pandemic as well, again, out of boredom and feeling isolated. But yeah, I think that was also probably a good time. Well, it was a unique time to start a podcast because people were more readily available because they were doing less because of the lockdown. And you had a post on Instagram that caught my eye, and you said, you know, you've recorded, when I looked at how many you've done, it looks like it's approximately 67 episodes, which is a lot, you know, within a year. And the top 5 most listened to episodes were Travis Stevens, Henry Akins, Robert Drysdale, Roy Dean, Chris Howder. A lot of these guys are like, you know, a lot of my top list, you know, like fanboy jiu-jitsu people, you know, that I fanboy with. Who was your most memorable guest in the podcast so far?
I feel like that's such an unfair question.
I know, but I had to ask.
Well, you know, listen, I think first I'll tell you this. So, you know, me starting jiu-jitsu, I've looked up to a lot of those guys myself. And again, I've been on the mat for 20 plus years. And then yet, you know, all of these guys really, those are big names from way back in the day. They had established brands and names and academies when I was starting. So having conversations with them, it's almost like a drooling moment for me, you know. It's like, so I can only imagine what impact those conversations make on somebody who's just starting. Is probably magnified by 10. You know, so, you know, I don't know if I have like one favorite that really stood out, but I think they all have a different characteristics. They all have different dynamics, you know. So like, you know, Roy Dean, I mean, deep philosophy, like, man, that guy, he could talk about, you know, mechanics and philosophy and why things work for hours. What a phenomenal conversation. And then you got Chris Howder, who's, I mean, let's just leave it at personality. You know, it's like
the dirty dozen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, talk about doing jiu-jitsu before jiu-jitsu was jiu-jitsu. Like, and he tells the stories about going to the gym and having fights and like, you know, so it is such a unique conversation with every single one of those guys. Or even Robert Drysdale, you just mentioned. I mean, he recently released his book, and he's working on his movie, all about history of jiu-jitsu. You want to dig into history of jiu-jitsu? Listen to that guy. I mean, literally traveled for, if I'm not mistaken, it was 2 years. He went into Amazon and the whole thing. He found all these black belts. And the most interesting part about his story was that between the time when he was visiting them and when we were talking, I think 4 or 5 of those guys passed away.
Wow.
So sponge that for a second.
Yeah.
He was likely the last person who has documented those individuals. And you're talking about guys who started and went through these journeys with Helio Gracie, with Gracie family. You know, I mean, you talk about fundamentals, core of what jiu-jitsu is today. Without these guys, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
Yeah.
So like when we were talking to him particularly, that was mind-blowing. I was like, if he didn't do these interviews, these conversations would never take place.
Yeah,
like,
we never know. Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's mind-blowing to me at least, you know, and so
it is to me too. Yeah. I actually bought the book. I have his book and I'm slowly getting through it. And for listeners, the name of the book is Opening Closed Guard by Robert Drysdale. And it's basically it's the account of all the interviews that he made while he was filming the documentary that's still coming out that I'm really looking forward to seeing. I really want to see that thing. But yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, it's amazing that he was able to put together all that information and just sort of crack open the curtain, you know, about what really happened and how it really developed and so forth. All those guys you mentioned, all guys that I really enjoyed listening to. I've listened to many of them on other podcasts. Really enjoyed it. I hope to get some of them on mine. Hopefully I can get some of those interviews going, but yeah, I know that was sort of an unfair question, but I felt like, you know, I might be able to get interesting topic or discussion point. So I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. So I apologize. What other, another Instagram post that you made. Just when you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you.
I lost you.
Okay, hold on.
No, yeah, you're back on now, but
all right, there you go.
Can you repeat like last 30 seconds?
Last 30 seconds. I just said that, you know, I know that was sort of an unfair question to ask you, and I apologize. I figured you would give me a you know, not a really a straight answer, and I didn't expect you to, but I thought it'd be fun to ask. But no, I hope to get some of these guys on my podcast as well. I think that they're very interesting people to listen to. I've listened to a couple of them on a couple of different interviews, and it's always a lot of fun. I tend to listen to podcasts while I work out. Well, I do like strength conditioning at home or whatever, and it just passes the time, and it's a fun way to do it. And like, I don't know if you caught it, but I am looking forward to seeing that documentary that Robert's putting out. It should be good, and the book's really good.
I know they are working on it very extensively, and I think it's supposed to be coming out in 2023. I'm not sure exactly where they are with it at this moment, but I think you know, they had some obstacles and they are working on those. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah, when it comes out, I'll be like, just take my money, just take it. You know. Another good book though, around that same topic is Breathe. Hickson's book that just came out. I'm reading that one as well. That's a really good book, and actually very interesting as far as like his what he put in the book about growing up and his you know teenage years and stuff he got into. And I was like, wow, I was actually surprised by some of it.
Yeah, there were some raw moments.
Yeah.
And I really do appreciate him sharing some of those, you know, I mean, putting himself in that vulnerability point of sharing some of those really, you know, very interesting stories, you know, with police and drugs and people getting arrested and all and guns and other things. So if you haven't read it, whoever's listening out there, man, it's worth it. It's
absolutely
it's $20. Yeah, getting it is everywhere. You can get it everywhere, but it's worth the money.
Yeah,
it's really good books.
The Forger is really good too, written by Jocko Willink. The Forger is really good. Yeah, and actually, some of what he wrote in that forward actually influenced one of the questions on the interview today, because it's been going through my head. I'll just ask it right now. It's going through my head a lot lately, and I hear the term hobbyist a lot. People like to use the term hobbyist for people who train jiu-jitsu but don't compete. So there's usually this thing about hobbyist competitors. And personally, I don't like the term hobbyist, at least for myself. I have been contemplating even just like putting my thoughts down and writing them, even putting in like a solo episode of my podcast, which is like, don't call me a hobbyist. And I think where that comes from is that, you know, I think one can train jiu-jitsu with a genuine passion for the art, but maybe doesn't necessarily compete often. Maybe it's because of age, you know, available, you know, time to put the effort into it, etc. And even now with the pandemic, it's just, do you really want to do that right now? And, he or she, does it for the martial art itself and for the privilege and for the positive it brings to them. Jiu-jitsu can shape the practitioner's core values, the way that he or she conducts themselves in all aspects of their life. And that's really how I feel. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, hobby is this very general statement, and it could mean a lot to a lot of different people. But I think what is important to think about is when you engage into studying of jiu-jitsu is that it is very complex, and it will require a lot of devotion, a lot of sacrifices, a lot of more you put into it, more you're going to get out of it. That's right. So, and let me make sure that this is, kind of we are clear on what I mean by complex, because there's a lot of different interpretations of it. I do believe that jiu-jitsu is pretty simple. It is simple from understanding perspective, but it has several layers. And those layers make it create a complexity, essentially, right? So if one, wants to take a very shallow approach to jiu-jitsu, I don't think it's really difficult to learn jiu-jitsu. And I encourage everybody to try it, and determine whether that's something that's for them. I don't think jiu-jitsu is for everybody. However, I think everybody should try it. Now, from a complexity perspective, you can really, really take it deep. And this is where these layers come in. And you see, often you see, black belt and a black belt, they are not the same. You see blue belt and blue belt, they are not the same. One is higher skilled, the other one is, still working on it. And I think that's the important parts to remember. So going back to this hobbyist approach, I think more casual we take our studying, our education, then more casual results we are going to get, right? So if you're really trying to, there is a passion associated with this, and you really want to study jiu-jitsu and learn it and understand it, then there will be a requirement of putting effort into this, and it's not only, being 6 times a week on the mat. That's not even what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more about understanding what jiu-jitsu is, and how is balance, how does balance work? How is gravity? How can I use gravity to my advantage, and how can my partner can use gravity against me? What are the mechanics of this choke? How does armbar work? Like, do we really know what armbars are? I know you're pressuring here, you're pressuring there, but do you know what really happens? How come Kimura is very different submission versus arm lock? I mean, the mechanics of the motions of the joints are completely different, right? So often you'll hear people saying that by the time you achieve your black belt, the entire autonomy of human body, because it's you manipulate all these joints and apply pressure points and use, you're cutting blood supply to somebody's head. It's like you learn all of these things and you go through these motions, and is all with the passion for the art, right? So I don't know if hobbyist would be my favorite word, but we do have to acknowledge the fact that there will be guys who will train twice a week, consistently for 10 years. They will become really efficient at it. Like, we can't ignore that. And they will never, ever, ever, not even one time step on the mat in a competition scenario. And there has to be a level of respect going to these guys, because they still putting the work in there, even though they're never going to be a world champion. Not everybody is going to be a world champion. And that's fine too, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, I competed a lot during, I'm purple belt now, but I competed a lot during white and blue belt. And then the pandemic hit. And I had my purple belt, I think, for a year before the pandemic hit. I got it in February 2019. I did try to compete a couple of times. Brackets were very hard to get. I noticed that as I got older, the brackets were smaller and smaller as I went up in the belts. And so it became a problem to actually get a bracket. Then I actually had a bracket at a tournament. It was a Jiu-Jitsu World League tournament right before the shutdown, and they canceled the tournament. And so they still have my money. I'm still, waiting to see what's going to happen. But I still I just love to train, and I train, probably 4 or 5 times a week, 4 days a week. But I also feel that a coach can, yes, you learn from your coach. You do. There are techniques you're going to learn from your coach, and there's things you're going to learn in principles. But I still think that the coach also, or the way I've always understood martial arts as I've gone through them through my whole life, most of my life, is that the coach can inspire you, but ultimately you're responsible for your own training. you're responsible for really the self-study, the learning, et cetera. And that is something I really do. I mean, even the days I don't train physically, I try to watch instructionals or study something or read something about it and try, or just think about it. So I guess that's where I'm coming from about the hobbyist thing. I get that. I mean, I understand there are people that train. I mean, I guess the person I consider a hobbyist is the person who trains like 2 or 3 days a week. And then when they're outside of the academy, they're not thinking about it at all. You know, they're just going about their life and they go in, they have fun and they roll. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely totally cool. But that's the way I sort of look at a hobbyist, I guess, in my own view. I don't consider myself a hobbyist. I feel that jiu-jitsu has much more of a strong hold on my life and who I am than a casual comment or a casual title like that.
Yeah, and you know, we have to think about these different engagement points where we can study, right? So I think like training, quote unquote, jiu-jitsu, I think is very different from studying jiu-jitsu. I think that they're very different engagement points, right? So like quickly going through these different opportunities that we have. So obviously we can attend a class, right? We can X amount of times we can do a class, right? Then we can attend seminars. I mean, that's another engagement point, very different from a class, right? But it's there, right? We can have a sparring sessions, we have drilling sessions, we can have a flowing session, right? I mean, all these are very different engagement points, which give us very different stimulation. Then we can watch videos. We can watch videos, we can study the videos. Here's another one, often underestimated. We can make notes and read the notes.
Yep.
As stupid as it is, making notes after your training sessions and see what you achieved, and then collecting the data over a period of 1, 2, 3, or 6, and then looking back and saying, oh, look, I couldn't pass the guard 6 months ago, but today I'm passing the guard 2, 3 times every session. I mean, that gives you a clear view of what is happening, right? I think in general, jiu-jitsu is so difficult to measure, right? So I'm pivoting off of that, your question, but it's, if you look at swimming, as just whatever, first one that came to my mind. You swim and you time it, and you get to the end, you get out of water, and you see you did better or you didn't, and it's pretty cut, right? And same thing, you play hockey, you score a goal, okay, you improve. There's speeds that you can measure it by far more efficiently, right? In jiu-jitsu, it's very, very difficult to do that for several reasons, but main ones are, one, because it's continuously evolving. So jiu-jitsu itself, it's continuously changing. That's one. Two, we often compare ourselves to our peers.
Right.
And then that's a moving target. That means we are chasing our own tail, essentially, right? Like we'll never achieve that. So finding anchor points where we can measure our own jiu-jitsu is really critical to our own success. So we know how we are progressing, right? And the instructor should be doing the same thing, right? I think instructor has a little bit easier job on that because they have the outsider view and they can see how everybody's working, you know, but looking at ourselves, it's very, very hard. It's like looking in the mirror every single day and you don't see that you're aging. But if you look at the picture from 10 years ago, you're like, damn, I was good looking, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
exactly the same. Yeah.
It's that. So making notes, it's in my opinion, I'm a huge note taker. Right here, look, my notes.
Nice. Yes.
I'm a huge note taker. So, and I take notes on everything, but that helps me really create a anchor points as time goes on, and I have a reflection point to go back. And more importantly, if you look at notes as a tool, you know, it's two things. One, when you're writing a note, you're engaging a different part of the brain versus listening or visually, right? So that's one. But then when you go back and you read the same note, now you're engaging a completely different part of the brain because there's a comprehension. You're trying to understand what you wrote, and you all that increases your memory. I'm not an expert by any means on brain or any of that, but my understanding is that every time you take written notes, you are increasing your ability to memorize whatever you're writing down in these concepts, these steps, and that raises your success. I mean, that's the bottom line, and that's what I call studying. It's not only being on a mat, not only, you know, going balls out and beating the crap out of each other. Is really understanding what is happening, why it's happening, and then how are we going to retain that information? How are we going to catalog this inside our head and then recall it at the right time?
Exactly. So I actually have a notebook in my bag, you know, that I have for jiu-jitsu. I have a book I keep. And then I mean, as a black belt who's trained for as many years as you have, I doubt you're writing down like techniques. You're writing down other things. For the student though, who's starting out, or even for an intermediate student or whatever, do you find that writing down techniques helps you retain retain the information? Sometimes I used to do that, where I would actually like put out these elaborate detailed notes on techniques that I learned. And then sometimes I went back and read them and I couldn't really, they didn't make sense to me. There were parts of it that it didn't work anymore. And I was like, what did I say? What was I saying? So do you think it's better to just write down statistical type information or things that pop in your head, as opposed to trying to be so detailed that it becomes like almost a hindrance?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. It's a very good thought to really kind of sponge and think about for yourself, if you will, because I think everybody will take notes differently. Tom will write down step by step, and I was laughing when you mentioned that, because recently, probably 6 months ago, I found a stack of notebooks, like 6 or 7 notebooks in my basement, and I'm like, what is this? And I flipped it, and I was like, oh, those are my jiu-jitsu notes when I was a white belt. And I start reading, listen, I started reading, and I had a step-by-step technique breakdown, and I'm reading, and I was like, it doesn't make any sense. What the hell was I thinking here?
Exactly.
But it was very interesting experience. But everybody takes notes differently, I think, and that's because we comprehend things differently. Our brains work very differently, and that's a big component of jiu-jitsu that often is talked about and underestimated. How do we understand the mechanics? How do we understand the moves? So I think, I don't know what's right, what's wrong. I don't think I'm the one really to kind of make the determination. How I'll tell you what some things that to keep in mind, or some things to take notes of, and if that works for a student, that's great. One is a general concepts or mechanics. Like we talk about certain grips. What's most efficient way of gripping somebody, right? We have 5 fingers. There's a thumb and 4 fingers. Yeah, understanding that. Maybe jotting it down, close with all 5 fingers. That's your strong grip. If you leave your thumb out unintentionally, doesn't matter. That's 25%. That's 20% of your grip. You just left out. Like that's a concept, right? So writing down some of those keynote concepts could benefit a student. Number 2, measure things. We briefly talked about this. Let's say I have 5 sparring sessions. Session 1, I went with Bobby. How did it go? Quickly, in 3 words. It went well, blah, blah, blah. I got stuck on side control. Session 2, I went with Johnny. Okay. Well, I was on top. I passed the guard twice. See, now we having a historical data to catalog, and we can reflect on it a little bit later. One of my students, and this is a true story, actually, one of my students, he said, listen, I'm struggling getting to the academy. I don't know what to do. I know I'm lazy. It's just like, it's a habit. I just need to break it up. And he goes, how can I do this? And I was like, okay, well, how many times would you like to attend? He goes, 3. I was like, we're going to make it 2. I was like, what does that mean? And I was like, you're making 2, twice a week across 4 weeks. That's a month. Okay. You're going to be 8 times 12. There was a number. This is how many times you need to be at the academy a year. And I was like, well, that's a big number. I was like, not really, because that's twice a week. Now, if you do it 3 times a week, that means that number is going to continue growing. I was like, okay, all right. So he starts measuring that, right? And after a few months, he was like, I'm going to add more to this. I was like, okay, great idea. What are you going to add? So he goes like, I'm going to actually add not only how many times I come into the facility, I'm going to count how many classes I attend. Then I'm going to count how many sparring sessions I have. And then I'm going to count how many techniques I'm actually doing, and he did this for about 2 years. And, during COVID, we were talking about this, and he pulled all the data out, and it was mind blowing because, in a very simple way, his success was clearly climbing. More he went through this, not only first of all, he didn't attend twice a week. He started attending 4 times a week because he got so stimulated. He wanted to overachieve his goals,
right?
And again, this is the power of note taking. It gives us as an honest, fixed point of reference in time, and that allows us to create a point of reflection, point of, think it's something to think about, and then we can make adjustments from there. So, again, we can make notes almost anything and everything. I think it kind of boils down to what are we trying to study? you know. So others, you know, create brain maps. I'm huge on brain maps. If you know, if you're not familiar with brain maps, there's a logical connection between motions. You know? So you know, I have guard, you know, we knee cut, then to side control, then to knee on belly, then to top control, reverse to the back control, and so on. And you create this map of how things could flow. What are your options? That gives you a visual. And it happens very often where we're like, oh yeah, I forgot about this. I forgot this was there. And again, this is all notes taking. This is all taking notes and stimulating your mind. You know, and as dorky as this sounds, I think jiu-jitsu is way beyond just being on the mat. It's really studying it and understanding what's going on.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I think, yeah, like a flow chart, that's a really cool idea too. But yeah, those are all great points. I'm actually going to start taking those kind of notes, different types of notes. I'm sitting here thinking about it while you're discussing it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to do all this. I'm going to start writing down all this stuff and see what happens. Maybe make a little spreadsheet to see how it is in 12 months, you know?
I'll tell you, one of the things I do in my privates, private lessons, you know, is I actually give my students homework. Like you don't show up to my private lesson, I'll give you all the answers. Like that I don't do it that way. I know some do it that way. You come to my privates and we are working. We are legit working. I'll guide you. You know, I'll create a path for you. I'll sweep that path, get all the leaves out of the way. I'll put little signs, the directions in which you need to go, but you need to walk it. Like that's just how it works. You know, so students often will have homework, and their homework could be, listen, we're working on passing the guard. Great. You're going to write down who you went with. What was your success? How many times you tried passing a guard, and what was your success rate? How many times you succeeded? And then we come back and we talk about, okay, you went with Bobby. You didn't pass the guard. Why? Why didn't you pass it? Well, because he's twice my size. Okay, that's a reason. I'm with you. Okay, so we need to work on being more mechanical, understanding weight balance and strategies, how to control the hips and so on, so on. Okay, good. You went with Johnny. Okay, how did it go? Oh, I passed him 6 times. Why? Why did you pass him 6 times? Why this one didn't work and this one did work? You know, and that's when we getting deeper into these conversations, and it gives you a bigger picture. Where's the room to improve, and what works well, and then from there we can start tweaking, we can start modifying, we can improve, and strategically making step by step. And I think, and the results are mind blowing. Because having that data in front of you, it's you know, something that you can't change. It's just raw truth of what happened. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and then maybe even I think you said Bobby, right, is the guy he passed. Maybe Bobby's taking notes too, and then Bobby realizes, why did he get passed 6 times? And he goes back and finds out why his guard retention sucks in that particular instance, and then he fixes it, and then student A is back to square one again because he can't pass his guard again. So he has to figure out some other new ways. So everybody's coming up, everybody's evolving and getting better. And that's the thing too, is, you know, I think we have to remind ourselves when we're in the academy and we're doing well for a while and then we stop doing as well, as that's because everybody else is getting good too. You know, so they're all figuring out your stuff and they're learning how to stop it, and you know, and you got to figure out new stuff.
And that's a big point to really keep in mind. As you getting better, they're getting better too. And not only that, not only did they get better, but they also learning how to counter you. So things get more complex, right? So we have to continuously evolve, continue working on new things, you know. And one of the things that my students found, they don't like doing this, but it's a great tool. Film yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
Film yourself.
Start doing that.
I know some instructors are not very on it, and some don't even like having videos in their academies and all that. That's between, you know, within the academy chemistry and dynamics. But filming yourself is fundamental. What we think is happening in our head as we are doing it is often not what's really happening.
Right.
You know what I mean? And video tells the truth. We do this often, you know, especially students who compete, or even students who are working on very specific things. I'll tell them, film yourself. Literally film yourself and bring it back and let's talk about it. And he's like, I was passing the guard. I was like, no, you really, no. Oh, he passed my bar so many times. Why did he pass your guard? I don't know. He's stronger. No, you're flat on your back. No, let's turn, let's create these angles, and then things change, because often we're not aware what we are doing. You know? So.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, I remember a while back getting ready for my purple belt promotion. I had to do, we had to do a 5-minute flow, and and demonstrate it. And my training partner and I worked on it for months, a good couple of months, and we did film it. And I remember watching it a couple of times, like in the beginning, like looking at it and going like, oh, it looks like crap, And so I would be really, I'm very self-critical as it is about stuff like that, but I was watching myself. And I was like, no, I don't like that. And, but it really did make me, tighten a lot of things up. And you're right. You don't really see it. When you're doing it, you really don't know really how it looks until you see it on film a lot of times. That's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Video tells truth, and whether we like it or not.
Doesn't lie. Don't lie. Picture doesn't lie, man. So you made a post on Instagram, and I can't recall because we went back and forth on a couple of different topics, but I may have already asked you this, but if I did, just tell me. But can you elaborate on a statement you made on Instagram, which read, when you compete against everyone else, no one wants to help you. But when you compete against yourself, everyone wants to help you.
Yeah. I remember when I posted that. It's an interesting part. I think as human by nature, we are more willing to help than we think. Mm-hmm. What I mean, we have actually some good in us, with all this crazy world around us. When we are working on ourselves, people are more willing to help us, and I think that is a big statement, especially in jiu-jitsu, when jiu-jitsu is such a unique, I think, sport where it is an individual sport, hobby, whatever you want to call activity, whatever you want to call it. Like, we work on ourselves, but we can't work with our partners. Like, dummies were great during pandemic. I love them. There's only so much dummies I can do. Right. So we need our partners. So I think that's the important part, kind of to think about it. So, more we engage into working on ourselves, I think more people are willing to actually help us and engage. Now, imagine what would happen if everybody was in that situation where everybody's helping each other, but at the same time, we're working on ourselves. It would be a great environment to really strong and continuous improvement as it goes on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think actually what's coming to my mind, you could tell me if I grasp the concept correctly or if I'm wrong, but it was like, God, was it last week? It was last week or the week before. I was rolling with a white belt, and I had passed his guard, and I was in north-south, and I was what do you call it? Tripoded up. So my shoulder was in his hips, and my head's on the other side of his hip. He can't move, but he's really moving a lot underneath. He's wasting a lot of energy, and he's just trying to get out, and he can't get out. And I'm holding onto his wrist, and I'm just thinking, okay, I'll just let him, tire himself out and I'll go. And long story short, I just, I applied a Kimura, and he tapped, and that was it. And we kept going. And at the end, I said, I told him, you don't want to waste all that energy underneath. You're moving around, but you're doing it at the wrong time. You're wasting a lot of energy when you should be conserving your energy, waiting for a better opportunity to move. That's more efficient to actually get out of the submission. And I guess the point of what I was telling is, like, I'm trying to help you get better so I can get better. Does that make sense? So if we help the newer people get better, that makes us better too, because they learn better jiu-jitsu. So we have to up our ante. They learn how to counter our techniques. So we have to get better at how to apply our techniques, etc. So I think that's sort of what you're saying.
No, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, we can't do jiu-jitsu alone. We can't. We can watch only so many videos, read so many books, and listen to so many podcasts, and try and drill with so many dummies. Like, it's a very dynamic activity, and studying it's really important, and studying with different people is really important. So I always say, surround yourself with people who are better than you, and you're going to be phenomenal. Yes.
I always make a point of rolling people who beat the brakes off of me as much as I can. That's the way to get better.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, right? So, like, I actually recently posted a video on YouTube. It is, should I train with a higher belt? And then I posted a separate video. Should I be training with a lower belt? And it's, as long as you understand, in my mind at least, as long as you understand what the goals are between each, and they're very different, it's going to bring you a lot of success. Your skills are going to continue going up. So, like, if I'm going with somebody who's much better than me, obviously I'm not, a likelihood of me catching them in submission is very slow, very slim. Right? However, I can start reading what they are doing. How are they? Where's the weight? And the expectations are very different now. I'm not trying to submit them. I'm not trying to even stop them, but I'm trying to understand what they are doing. And then we can start looking at how they set it up. Maybe they tapped you off 5 times. Well, how the hell did I do that? And then you take the second scenario where you're rolling with somebody who's by far less skilled. Now, if you tap them out 20 times, did you achieve anything? Well, I don't know, maybe point of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Did you take anything tangible away from it, right? Or you could enroll that person, you can flow with them, you can manipulate the situation, you can explore new opportunities. I often say that training with somebody who's just starting their journey could be actually more challenging than training with somebody who's been on the mat for 20 years, because the guys who just starting, they are more unpredictable.
Right.
It's not that they're trying to be unpredictable, they just don't know what to do. And that creates unique scenarios, unique situations with which we need to deal with. Right. Yeah. So it is different challenges, different goals, different obstacles, but from both situations, we can really draw some conclusions and really continue evolving, continue learning.
No, I agree. I mean, when I roll with somebody who's much better than me, like much higher belt, I mean, the goal I usually have is try to reduce how many times they get submitted. So basically work on my defense. Like you said, work on understanding what they're doing and how I can get ahead of the attack and defend it and not get submitted. So those are the things I try, or can I actually pass their guard? Can I, if I'm working on my guard passing, that's like a big thing for me right now. So, but yeah, when I'm with a lighter person, I might work on something that I'm just starting to work on. So, you want to get the mechanics down with somebody who's not as skilled. You might have, better success to figure out what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And then try it out with somebody who's about your same skill level as you feel more comfortable with it. But yeah, those are all great points too. So how about this? Do you have a preference between Ghee or Nogi Jiu-Jitsu? In your opinion, what are the major differences between the two? And how can one complement the other? For the average enthusiast, what percentage of each would you recommend?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's preference. I know these days there's a lot of emphasis on Nogi. You see a lot of competition Nogi. I think there's an entertainment factor for Nogi being a little bit more appealing, right? The main differences between each, I think, it's friction. I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? Majority, and obviously the clothing, you cannot, some of the chokes, Ghee chokes or lapel chokes are not available in Nogi for obvious reasons. There's no fabric. But the biggest difference is the friction, right? So with Ghee, you can slow things down significantly. You're not going to be as dynamic. The transitions are not going to be as fast as in the slippery Nogi scenario. Right. So those are the big factors. In my mind, which one you should train, which one you shouldn't train, what the ratio is. I think that's going to really depend on your goals. If you want to, really engage into Nogi competition, obviously you need to be Nogi. Like, just it is what it is. I think for a very long time there was this thought of you have to train Ghee no matter what, and even MMA guys were training. You need to train Ghee no matter what, and even MMA guys were training in Ghee while they were training for MMA fights. I think with the evolution of Jiu-Jitsu, that has changed. If you want to become an expert in Nogi, you need to train Nogi. That's just, it is what it is. If you want to be good in a Ghee, you need to train Ghee. Like, it is what it is. It's not right or wrong. They're just very, very different depending on what the academy is doing, depending on what student is, what their desires are and goals are. I would focus, because end of the day, listen, we got 7 days in a week. We got only a handful of hours to do this thing. Most of us, have careers. Most of us have professions, families, kids, and all the other things that take up by far more time than Jiu-Jitsu will. And being very selective and very specific as far as the quality of training is really, really important. I mean, today, I think with how busy the world is and how busy we are, I think we are lucky when we get, some guys get only twice a week, legit. Like, they don't have, I have a couple doctors in my academy and they work literally 12, 14-hour days, and they don't have time. When I see them, I was like, whoa, high five, man. Awesome.
You made it.
And like, even today, like earlier we had classes in the morning, and one of the guys came out. I was like, I haven't seen you this week. And he was like, I know, my wife is pregnant, and it's just, I have to be I was like, I get it. Congrats. Good for you. This and this and that. Let's have good training. Yeah. So we need, in my opinion, because we have such a limited time, we have to be smart about the training. We have to be selective, and this is, I think, where these different strategies come in really handy for every student. If you can come 2-3 times a week, maximize that. Make sure you drill. Make sure you know, even instead of watching nonsense on TV, watch some YouTube before you get to the class. Watch some instructionals, whatever the case is. There's so many subscription services these days. You can buy DVDs or almost any jiu-jitsu thing. You can get anything for free on YouTube.
Yeah.
Look it up. It's free content.
Yeah.
Just watch one or two of them. Prepare yourself before the class. You just raised your success.
Yeah, I mean, BJJ Fanatics puts out so much free material. Like, even just if you just go and look at like John Danaher's interviews or videos, the free ones, like the commercials, basically, you know, with Bernardo, they're like 20, 25, 30 minutes long, and there's actually a lot of good information in them. And I know I don't care what anybody says. I know in my personal experience, I can watch a video, take a couple of concepts that are like details that I didn't know before out of a major or an overall subject that I'm familiar with, and apply them. I can go to the academy and just go apply them because they just stick in my head and I do them and they work. So I think it's a great way to train. I mean, on your own, as far as like what I said earlier about self-study and so forth. I think it's great. So, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, that stuff's available. It's readily available. It's whether or not, you make the decision that you want to invest your own time into it and how important it is to you, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, like I currently train in an academy. I recently switched academies and I'm loving the experience, but my new academy is primarily Nogi, and where I came from is primarily Ghee. I mean, we had a Nogi class, but because of scheduling, like you were saying before, life, work, etc., I could never get there. I did Nogi, I think over 7 years. I think I did it probably a handful of times. But now I'm doing the opposite, or now I'm like, training mainly Nogi, and I do Ghee once a week. But yeah, I feel like I'm sort of evening myself out, but I also feel like they are two, like you said, they are sort of two separate arts. I mean, there are different rule sets, and you have all the heel hooks and everything in the Nogi that aren't allowed in the Ghee, and so it is different. It is different. But I just want to get your opinion on it. I always ask that question, and I like to hear the responses. If you had to pick your top 3 concepts for practitioners to focus on to develop an effective game as quickly as possible, what would they be?
Guard.
Okay.
Guard. Whatever the guard is, I think no matter how you look at jiu-jitsu, no matter how you slice the jiu-jitsu, we are always either passing the guard or defending the guard. Right. So knowing how to retain the guard, knowing how to have the defense mechanisms in place, in having the ability to do that, I think it's a critical and unquestionable point of jiu-jitsu. If you watch anything on any of the fights, super fights, or even worlds or Pan Ams, Ghee or no Ghee, doesn't matter. Everybody's passing guard. The person who passes the guard, first of all, the person who gets the takedown, that person dominates. That's pure statistics, right? A person who passes the guard, most of the time, the person wins. So knowing how to defend yourself is critical, in my opinion, right? There's nothing more frustrating when you're trying to pass the guard and you can't.
Yes.
And it's not because they are squeezing you or they have a closed guard. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the situation when you almost got to the side control and they regard it. You almost got to the top and you get swept. You almost passing it and somehow they got you again.
Have you watched me roll? I mean, yeah.
There's nothing more frustrating about that, right? There's nothing more frustrating. It's so annoying, right? But yet it is so powerful on the other side when you can use the mechanics and their motion, their balance of being actively pressuring into you, and you continue resetting, right? Often, especially in the very beginning of our journeys, when we go, I would say first 2, 3, 4 years, we hyper focus on submissions because it's a point of satisfaction. We win. You win. Yes, I got it, right? And often, because we focus on the end result, we forget about some of these very important fundamentals, which is defending, knowing how to create space, knowing how to keep that space, distance control, right? And I'm not talking about knife fighting or street self-defense. I'm talking about we are flowing. You passing my guard, I'm defending, I'm sweeping, I'm reversing. Knowing how to protect yourself in those aspects is critical. majority questions that I get, especially in my privates, is how do I escape side control? Like that's one of the most common questions, right? So in my mind is if we could stop somebody from getting to our side control, we don't have to escape anymore, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
makes sense.
Pretty simple concept. Now we need to work on how to prevent that from happening. What is the concept of guard retention, right? So creating these layers, space control, distance control, and so on, and continuous motion, weight distribution, and so. So I think guard retention is one of the most important things that one should focus, especially on the very beginning of their journey.
Right. Now, that's a great point. It reminds me of what Kurt Osiander used to always say. If you're already there, you already effed up a long time ago. Sort of the same concept.
It's pretty simple, right?
Yeah,
like I can show you how to escape, but you messed up.
Yeah, you messed up a long time ago. Yeah, you shouldn't have let him get there in the first place. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are your favorite training methods? Do you prefer free rolling, drilling, or situational sparring, situational drilling? Positional?
We kind of touched on that a little bit earlier, but I think they have a very different purpose. And I think the student who's able to dip into most of those buckets, most of those training methods, that student will succeed the most. That's in my mind. What I mean by this, coming to classes only is going to get you only so far. But if you've never sparred in your life, you're going to get destroyed. It's not, your success won't be the same. Now, on the flip side, if you come only to sparring sessions, but you never attend a class, you never explore opportunities of technique and mechanics and balance, you're just going to, you're not going to be successful, right? So it is very fine balance because we have limited time, but it's very fine balance between classes, understanding techniques, continuous improvement of your mechanics, then flowing, right? Or even before flowing, I would say drilling, meaning continuous repetition of the same move to make sure that that motion within that move is nice and fluid. You see the triggers, you can execute. Then we would get to flowing, which is connecting different techniques, and it's all about transition. It's not about the technique itself, it's about the transition between them, right? And then we can get into things like sparring, which is, think about like a, midterm. You're testing yourself, right? It's let's see how that drilling, flowing, and the technique that we learned, how that actually is applicable in a more real life scenario when motions are in play, adrenaline is going up, adrenaline is hitting, and it all that is happening while my partner's trying to smash me, or they're trying to defend me. So that's like the midterm. So I think a very happy balance for a student where they can dip into several of those opportunities that's what raises the success, So that's essentially what I try to do personally. I love training, sparring hard. I love it. At 42, I'm not the same. My body's not the same as it was at 32 and 22, but I love training. I do love training, but I also love drilling. I love drilling. I love flowing. I do set separate time for myself for drilling, and me and my partner will literally drill for an hour and a half, continuous repetition of the same motions, So, and I'm a big fan of studying. I'm a big fan of studying. I'll watch, instructionals, I'll watch videos, I'll analyze matches, I'll make notes on them, really try to draw conclusions of what is happening, why things work, what is he trying to achieve, So, I try to invest a lot of time into that.
Excellent. So I want to touch on something you just said. So how has your sparring evolved in the last 20 years as you got older?
Yeah. So anybody who trained with me way back 20 years ago will tell you I was not the nicest training partner. I always loved running hard. I always have gone hard. And that created a lot of wear and tear on my body too. But as time went on, I really put a lot of emphasis on flow and technique more than power and speed. And today, I would rather spar for an hour nonstop than go, 2 7-minute rounds and be done.
Right.
And there was a purpose behind going hard, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that I try to find the recovery points within the matches, right? So I rarely try to sit out, when I'm in sparring sessions, I'll go all the way through. but I'm trying to find these recovery points during the time, and at the same time, when we're flowing, like I have no interest in submitting you, or if I do submit you, it's catch and release.
Right.
No, but I'm all about flowing. I'm all about these transitions and, finding, if the partner is cooperative in that sense, and we both have an interest of flowing, we'll flow. We'll flow for, for a long time.
Excellent. Excellent. So outside of martial arts, what interests do you have?
Nothing. I'm boring. No. I used to run a lot, like 30, 40 miles a week. But my knees no longer allow me to do that. So at some point in the recent, I converted to biking. So I do bike. I do bike quite a bit. That's during summer. Illinois is not so bike friendly during winter time. So but that's one of the things. And then obviously my family, my kiddos and all that takes up a lot of time. So I'm also I'm quite a bit interested in photography. I've been doing photography for most of my life, honestly. Like I remember getting a first camera, 35 millimeter. My dad got me like I was 80 years old. So I've been doing photography for quite a bit. I've done professional photography.
Nice.
So that takes up some of my time too. I try to, from family to different, art engagement points. So I do that as well.
Well, it's very artistic. So you'll appreciate this next question. So I'm an artist, so I like to draw. I just do pen and paper type stuff, or Bristol board and ink. But I especially like to do superhero stuff for reason. I'm just a geek, I guess. So I like that stuff. Who's your favorite superhero?
Batman.
Oh, you're a man after my own heart.
Batman, hands down.
So,
and here's my explanation. He's one of the handful of superheroes who doesn't have superpowers.
Exactly.
That's what I love about him. It's all about
for me. Yeah, I like the fact that he has no superpowers. He's smart. He's resourceful. And he just gets it done. Yeah, that's right. It is my favorite as well. So give me a couple months, and I'm going to send you a little thank you for doing the podcast. I had a great time talking with you today. And people can reach you at on Instagram at Rozdzynski BJJ or at ROL / or at the ROL Radio. You also have a website at www.rolacademy.com. Are you on Facebook? Are you on Facebook as well?
I am, but honestly, my
Very
Facebook
rarely.
is so underutilized that I don't even check it. Instagram's the best way to get a hold of me. I know my name is there's a lot of Z's and stuff. My dad's fault, not mine. I blame my dad for all the.
It's all good. It's all good.
You can easily find me on Instagram and feel free to reach out at any point. I respond to all of the messages as I get them.
It was an honor having you on, and I really enjoyed the conversation. It was great. Hope you'll come back in the future, and we can have another conversation.
I love it. It was a great time.
All right, great. All right, thank you very much. And like I said, I will be sending you a care package in a couple months.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.